there are a lot of different elements to Biden's view of this, and he's kind of following what the European Union has already laid out on artificial intelligence. I'll have an article about this out actually, hopefully tomorrow. But what the Biden view of artificial intelligence and how it should be regulated is a very pessimistic model. And when you ask what is the actual technology that we're talking about here, what we've seen primarily in the United States, a little bit in Singapore, a little bit in China, is we have these large language models. That's what they're called. And this is essentially just a huge database that has every possible piece of information, command, you name it. And we've been able to use that for generative art. You come up with various themes, topics, words, and I can output an image or video or different elements of your workflow. And what the Biden admin has done in this executive order is lay out a lot of very restrictive elements that really the only other bloc that's looking at this is Europe. And it's definitely not where I pull my sort of tech inspiration. But if we look at the order, a lot of it is just based on this risk model. So there's going to have to be a lot of reporting. Anytime that there's any update in your AI model, you're having to report that to the federal government in some capacity. You're having to register where you have your servers and your computers with the government. There will have to be a continuous review of your safety outputs on your product for government review. Again, there's nothing about how AI will improve our lives, living conditions, technology, innovation, and a very pessimistic view about how do we control this and restrict it. I think it's kind of problematic what we already have from the Biden administration. The focus here, again, he's using elements of law from the Defense Production Act, something that Biden has invoked, I believe now 9 or 10 times, to have various parts of executive authority. And this is supposed to be something used around wartime, but it's being used here to try to figure out how we can restrict and hopefully direct development in AI. I think it's the wrong approach. And I think it's actually very restrictive to the open source version of AI that already Facebook and Microsoft, they put out huge models open source online. Anyone can download them, use them, make their own products. What the Biden executive order does, it actually goes against that ethos and is going to make that more difficult, more costly. The compliance costs are going to go through the roof. And you're only going to have a few incumbents who are going to be able to afford this. And unfortunately, we're not going to have a Silicon Valley of AI if this actually goes through. We're just kind of going to have a very government, regulated, stinted program. And yeah, that could be pretty bad for the American people.
Yeah, Ossowski joining us. I think this is a good example of something that we've talked about for years now, because we've been doing this for years because we're starting to get old and you've been a friend for a long time. Appreciate you, by the way. We're doing this backwards. So basically, and Biden's doing this, but everybody else does it too. I'm not just picking on him, but he's in the chair, so he gets the blame for this one. The United States government as a whole, we do a really good job of trying to hold things accountable that haven't even actually happened yet. But then, like the thing we were just talking about with, the unidentified and the government investigation stuff, we don't want to actually do accountability for the stuff that has happened or is happening. We have this exactly backwards when it comes to accountability. We're scared to death of this future technology, so we're trying to hold it accountable while it's still in the gestational stages and you don't even know what it is. It's like Seven, what's in the box? We don't know what's in the box. Oh, it's going to be a severed head. You don't know that yet. Just calm down. But we want to have all kinds of accountability for this thing way out there in the future that's scary, but we don't want to have accountability over Congress is doing right now or has been doing in the last few years. And then we go, well, why are we having budget issues? Why are we having government shutdowns? That's kind of a core reason right there is we're doing this stuff backwards.
Yeah, we kind of are. I think it does have a lot to do with rhetoric. And, your best buddy, Elon Musk, has talked a lot about the existential threat to humanity of artificial intelligence and AI. And one founder of a sort of Google AI, I think is Andy Nig is his name. He made the point that many of these companies are like using these, worst case scenario doomscape things to really try to entrench themselves as the incumbents and make sure that, the regulations are something that favor only them, which, that's classic regulatory capture. But yeah, we barely have this, the generative AI and, the inputting, whether it be Chat GPT or something else, this has been around a year. We've actually seen a consumer-facing model for a year. There's some impressive stuff. It is not changing the scope of our entire work lives. But again, this is step by step. And if you think that the entrepreneurs know the potential of this, you're wrong. They don't know. It's all entrepreneurial discovery. How is anyone who's in a bureaucracy or in a government agency supposed to also stay on the same level and then have some kind of approach that would be amenable to innovation, that would be amenable to protecting your rights online? We just don't have it yet. So I think the simpler approach, just keep the laws on the books, enforce those. If there are people who do things with misinformation, disinformation, do things around elections, we have laws on the book for that. I think it's just, we got to wait and see. Singapore is taking that approach. We've seen that with some Latin American countries as well. If we just allow the entrepreneurs to deliver us something and we can better understand it, perhaps there's a time to do it. I just don't sincerely see the case for coming down on AI on that much, at least with regulation through executive order. Perhaps something with Congress and hearings and accountability. There is another theme, but yeah, we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, and we definitely don't want to follow the EU because their tech sector compared to our tech sector, it's not particularly close right now, especially on innovation. Yaël Ossowski joining us. I was just, it brought to mind a conversation I had with somebody who's extremely smart, way smarter than me. And they were kind of correcting me on something, and they think on these things. And I made some comment about how the smartphone was a revolutionary technological step. And this is one of the smartest people on the planet stepped in. He goes, no, it wasn't. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, it wasn't revolutionary. It was a consolidation of existing technologies into a consumer product where everybody had access to it. That's not revolutionary. That's a condensation of existing technology. And his argument to me, and it made me think, he's like, that's how you need to view the AI stuff. This is not going to be an revolutionary step that people think it is. It's just going to be another consolidation because it's just changing the format of how information is handled. And of course, his argument is stuff like, the computer age, that was a revolutionary step because that created the information wave that and the rest of this is surfing. Where do you see the AI stuff and where we are? Because we seem to be kind of in this little bit of a plateau technologically. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on, but we're just putting new casings on the iPhone. We're not really inventing the iPhone, for example, things like that. How do you see technology, especially from the consumer side of it? We seem to be in a bit of plateau. I think people are maybe taking it for granted a little bit right now. I think that's fair to say. I think the regulatory stuff's getting a little ugly because they don't know what to do with this stuff. But how do you view it?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of happening all around us. And again, is everybody just putting together different features that will one day be part of a suite of products at Google or Meta or Microsoft? That's kind of been maybe the mantra of Silicon Valley the last 5 or 6 years, is hope to get acquired so you can become a feature on these. I think there are some elements that are obviously very helpful. And again, I mentioned using ChatGPT, for us writers, it feels a bit like cheating. So that's why I don't touch it too much. But definitely with images and videos and creativity, there's a lot that can be done. I think actually where I am a bit more, I will dip my toe into the pessimist pool. Otherwise, I'm a total tech optimist. I think, if we can apply this in any way to healthcare delivery, figure out ways that we can have better competition, lower cost, I'm all for it. The pessimist wave, I'm looking more at what are our restrictions going to be on how government can use AI. And this is not really addressed within the Joe Biden executive order. We already know how police departments are using things like facial recognition. There's a startup called Clearview AI that the reporter Kashmir Hill, I believe she's at New York Times, she wrote a book about this. They've been able to amass the largest photo database of any entity in the world, bigger than the US government. And they're selling that information to governments in order for those governments to take on investigations, all these different things. I think the legislative focus, while there's all this innovation happening, has to be a restriction on what governments can do with this stuff, how they're able to use it. If we think of like the worst case scenario, it's a Minority Report, Philip K. Dick predictive crime scenario. But we also have to find a way that we can still use our Constitution. We can still invoke our individual rights. All these things that are happening, I think will have a different use case depending on your industry, and it'll take time. And the greatest innovation might not be there. But I think putting restrictions on what government can do with it, I think that's going to be a more important question of our time than what, new whistle bell app is delivered to us on our phone. That's kind of how I'm viewing it for right now. Still very much a tech optimist. Just would not like to see too much discretion and power used by government, which would not only stop the entrepreneurship, but also perhaps down the line endanger our own rights and freedoms.
Yeah, Ossowski. Again, this is something of, these are very old principles we're dealing with. This is just the tech spin and tech nomenclature on it. You go back to the American Constitution. It is limiting what government can do to the people because the people have inalienable, inherent, enumerated rights, and the government can't do anything about it because the government doesn't give them that right. This is just the same conversation again, but we're talking about it with tech and going, okay, does the government have a right to do this, or do we have rights and the government needs to respect them? Do we need to just have that basic conversation again? Because it feels like we need to reiterate that every 10, 15 years or so. People forget it. This is just the same stuff we've always had to deal with as a free people self-governing. We're just using big terms like AI and Microsoft and Google and whatever on top of them, but it's the same problems, right?
Yeah, and I think I'll give you a recent example. We've heard from it's a couple of very good journalistic reports about private mobile data. And we saw this a little bit during the pandemic. They would tell us, oh, we've seen there's less people that are driving into downtown. Well, how do they know that? Well, they know because they have the cell towers that are tracking everyone's cell phone. Okay, but the government doesn't have that information. How are they including that in the public health statistics? Well, they actually go out and buy the data from data brokers who buy it from the cell phone companies, the towers, the infrastructure providers. I think that is something that we have to be very wary of as well, because a government needs a warrant to access certain information about your location, about what you're doing on your phone, where you are at whatever time. But if they're able to bypass that using third parties, it's the same in the UAP discussion where there's third parties, military contractors, there are ways to get around FOIA. That is something that a practice that is far too ingrained in government right now. We need to be sure that we uphold these restrictions. These are negative rights that we have, the freedom from. And I think where we've seen a lot of that abuse has been probably with people who we don't like, people who are accused of murder, shootings, drug dealers, bad guys in every television show ever. You see how far the CIA or CSI guys go, and you say, this is wonderful. But we have this fabric of a constitutional order that exists for a reason. And we can't sacrifice it, whether it be because there's a war in the Middle East and we're trying to promote one side or another. A lot of things are inherent. And I think we're losing sight of that recently. And I think technology in some cases could make it worse. So I'm dipping my toe right back in the pessimist pool.
Yeah, Yaël, Ossowski. I want to round this back up to the consumer choice level, which is your wheelhouse. I think there's a good bit of just good old-fashioned corruption that rears its head with this too. We just covered on the show the Matthew Perry thing, where apparently, the TMZ paid off the law enforcement and got the story before anybody else did. Wolfgang Van Halen was tweeting about it and said, yeah, when I was in the hospital, when my dad died, we hadn't even left the hospital yet. They had it out because they paid off a medical worker. We're talking about the government doing government employees like law enforcement, healthcare employees. You were talking about healthcare reform earlier. I think that's a part of the data information war that we do need to deal with in a regulatory way, in a law enforcement way. There needs to be some real penalties to people, especially government people, especially healthcare people, who deal with personal data and just sell it off to people. Good old-fashioned corruption has been going on for forever. That's something that we practically need to do something about with ethically. That's just kind of the on-the-ground meaning of technology that we don't think about, but we're going to see more and more and more of that because you're going to have more and more medical administrators. You're going to have more law enforcement. It's going to have more access to more databases. People are going to buy that information. That seems like a hole in laws that are probably going to have to get caught up, case law, tried in court. But we need to address that part of it from a consumer level, don't we? Because that's very practical to people like, hey, you sell your car to somebody and now somebody's got your car buying history or your driving record and they just sell it to somebody, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's not hard to imagine. We've seen it in other authoritarian countries. You get a bunch of people come out for a rally, pro-Palestine, pro-Israel, you name it. And then the police somehow get the information from the cell phone providers. They go back to those people. Hey, were you at this protest the other day? And we know that because of these records. Okay, did you get a warrant? No, we bought the information from here, there, and everywhere. The executive order written by Biden does make one very good point, in that he does say Congress should pass a national privacy law. A privacy law, something that can help protect our data privacy online, specifically when it comes to government organizations, but also would help promote innovation and allow us to be able to make our data portable if we want. And that is not yet in the cards. There's a couple states that do have privacy legislation: California, Vermont, Virginia. These are somewhat comprehensive, oftentimes too restrictive, and take, again, an influence from the European GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which goes too far. I can attest by how many cookies I have to reject each and every day. But that is something that we have to come up with. And I made a similar point around the whole argument of central bank digital currency, CBDCs. There's a lot of people who love to ban them outright and do it. The only way you can actually do things legitimately, legally, and constitutionally in the U.S., especially at the federal level, is restrict Congress from passing a law on X or Y, or restrict executive agencies from practicing some power. That's how we have to continue to view our government. You know, we don't pass laws to try to restrict people. It's supposed to be restricting institutions of power. It's, again, how our Constitution is written. Things have changed a lot in 100 years, and we've really gone down to your own behavior, the things you buy, the things you drink, the things you smoke. But I think there has to be a return to that, because we have a system of negative rights that should be protected, that are, you know, the basis of the American experiment. We've kind of gone too far. However, you know, this is why technology is good, trade is good, competition is good, and we do have an out if in case we do feel we're being abridged.
Yeah, Ossowski joining us. We saw a little bit of case law along that where the courts did step in and told cops, like, no, you can't just geofence a whole group of people and start picking people out, although they're going to keep trying to do that. You can imagine how that could get used for protesters. Are you going to start targeting the smoke, you know, the VA's a smoke-free campus, the same 4 people are outside the gate smoking every day? Are we going to start targeting smokers? Are we going to start targeting legal gun owners? Every time the Democratic Socialists want to have a rally, are they going to get targeted? Pick whatever you want. You can see where that stuff could go bad in a hurry, because there's always going to be this push-pull between the government, law enforcement. Healthcare is going to want to start getting more of your private data, especially the insurance companies, because they're going to want to find a way to get out of those insurance contracts. The healthy push-pull is going to start encroaching into that privacy stuff. What do you recommend folks look for to where the line gets crossed? Because they're always going to push it. There's always going to be that. And it's not an unhealthy thing, frankly. There should be a little bit of push-pull on the cutting edge of this stuff, because we're all trying to figure it out and technology has to advance. Give folks 1 or 2 things to look for as consumers of when it crosses the line, or when they should start reading up on it, or when it's time to start haranguing the Congress critter, or whatever the case may be.
I think the best thing to do right now is, it's not even the old, write your congressman, is just start using privacy tools to be sure you can opt out of all this stuff. So start using password managers, start using email alias things, encrypted emails, start using browsers that don't leak out all of your information. Stop allowing ads. You can block cookies if you want. All the tools already exist. And that's how you're going to be sure that you don't get your information out, and make it as easy as possible. You can go on the dark web right now and scan every large corporate data breach that you've ever had in the last 50 years. And everyone's information is there. You can find social security numbers, you can find addresses, passwords that you might have had on your Yahoo in 1999. So the best thing to do now is just to protect yourself using the tools that already exist. I think that's sincerely the best way we're going to get through this, until a federal data privacy law exists, where people will have some level of private right of action when your info is leaked. That's the best thing to do. So again, password generators, be sure you try to use a different email for various services that are important or not. Use 2-factor authentication as much as possible. That is the only way that you're really going to be able to protect yourself. It'll take a long time for Congress to do it. And I think we have it within our power to do that right now, online, at home, for our families.
So
why not start now?
Yeah, Yaël Ossowski, our very good friend from our friends over at the Consumer Choice Centers. Great folks over there. Have a few new names, too, we'll talk about soon. Try to get some of them on the program. Let folks know where they can keep up with you, what y'all got going on, and how to follow you until we get you back on the program again, my friend.
Love it, Sir Andrew. So, yeah, we're at consumerchoicecenter.org. Active on all the social medias, as always, trying to keep up with all the trends. But you'll see kind of all of our articles, all of our media hits, clips, policy primers, and more over there on the website. So have some nice stuff. Again, things on AI, things on private rail, healthcare. We got it all coming in the next couple of weeks. I'll be sure to send it your way.
Attaboy. We love having it. Follow them. They do really good work, and we always appreciate them. Yaël is one of our oldest supporters of this particular program. He tells me all kinds of tech stuff that I still don't understand. I just do what he tells me to do. Yaël, I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. All the best.
Yes, sir.